Hello and welcome to our special event today, A Winning Tool, how the IHRA definition has transformed the fight against anti-Semitism. I'm Laura Nizo, and it is a pleasure to have you with us for this distinguished online gathering hosted by the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement. We're live on Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and if you miss anything, you'll get a recap to your inbox. Plus, a full recording of the event will be available online at the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement's social media channels. Well, in recent years, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism has emerged as the global gold standard in the collective effort against all manifestations of rising contemporary Jew hatred. The IHRA definition's far-reaching impact is rooted in the broad-based consensus that has formed around it, with more than 1,100 entities worldwide endorsing it as an essential tool to delineate what constitutes prejudiced behavior toward the Jewish people. Joining us today are representatives of governmental bodies and other organizations that have adopted the IHRA definition, who will share why they did so and how it positively impacted society. We'll also hear from a number of high-level experts who will highlight the vital importance of the IHRA definition and discuss what needs to be done to foster its continued growth and implementation in the years ahead. Before we begin, let's lay the groundwork for our program today by watching a short video about the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism.
In the aftermath of World War II, humanity became aware of the horrific consequences of unchecked anti-Semitism. 6 million Jews murdered in one of the worst atrocities in history, the result of anti-Semitic rhetoric, lies, and extremist ideologies. The world vowed never again, but Jew hatred has been on the rise for years. So what's different now? Jews are being attacked from the far left, the far right, and radical Islam. Once again, anti-Semitism is going mainstream, this time with unchecked online hate leading to real-world attacks.
Shortly after Kanye West made headlines, he's back in the hot seat, this time for sharing several posts that were deemed anti-Semitic.
In the U.S. alone, 85% of Americans harbor at least one anti-Semitic belief, with 1 in 4 American Jews experiencing this hate over the past year. In Europe, over a third of Jews have considered emigrating, fearing for their safety. The time is now to step up and stop it. But how? To fight the threat of contemporary anti-Semitism, we must first be able to uniformly define it. That's where the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance comes in, a global institution with 45 member and observer states. IHRA's working definition of anti-Semitism was crafted by leading experts and historians from dozens of countries, laying out 11 examples of modern anti-Jewish hate, with broad-based backing across the religious, political, and ideological spectrums. It's a critical tool for governments, law enforcement, corporations, schools, and more, from developing training and educational programs to creating zero-tolerance policies that work. So who's adopted it? According to the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement's latest report, over 1,100 entities around the world, including states, provinces, cities, universities, NGOs, and sports teams. 39 countries, among them the US, Canada, Germany, the UK, and France. 30 US states, and 56 US cities and counties like Miami, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C., alongside major European capitals like London, Paris, Vienna, and Madrid. This moment matters. Adopting and implementing the non-binding IHRA definition of anti-Semitism is a key step in reversing the rising tide of hate.
Now, I'd like to introduce Arthur Mesargin, Chief of Staff and Director of International Affairs for the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, who will help frame our discussion today by demonstrating the widespread use of the definition around the world. Welcome, Arthur.
I'm so encouraged by having such a diverse group of leaders and advocates join us today for this very timely program to demonstrate the impact and future potential of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism as one of the most mainstream and effective tools that we have at our disposal in the struggle against soaring anti-Semitism around the world. As anti-Jewish hate increasingly penetrates mainstream discourse and is adversely impacting the safety and continuity of Jewish life, both in places where we thought these lessons were hard learned and those where we never imagined them, CAM undertook to study the definition's momentum and use around the world with our partners at the Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry at Tel Aviv University. In January of this year, we released a report tracking and analyzing IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism adoptions and endorsements worldwide to both demonstrate its widespread use as the strongest tool against contemporary anti-Semitism and to encourage its adoption in more jurisdictions. The data tells an encouraging story, demonstrating the definition's acceptance across continents, across partisan divides, cultures, and faiths. A diverse array of international institutions and organizations, national and local governments, NGOs, universities, and athletic clubs are now using it as a framework for recognizing modern-day iterations of anti-Semitism and for training and educational programs and policymaking initiatives. In the United Kingdom, for example, the vast majority of municipalities, educational institutions, and athletic clubs have rejected anti-Semitism by adopting the definition, including almost every major political party from Labour to the Conservatives. To date, more than 1,160 entities worldwide have adopted or endorsed the IHRA's definition. In 2022 alone, 91 new adoptions and endorsements were reported, and so far in 2023, more than 20 have done so. What began as a trend in Europe several years ago has moved to the Western Hemisphere, where the vast majority of Jewish communities outside Israel now reside. Last year, more than 52% of adoptions took place in North America and an even greater majority in the Western Hemisphere, led by the US, Argentina, and Canada. In the United States, from Alabama to New York and Idaho to New Mexico, 18 new U.S. states, both Democrat and Republican, adopted the definition last year, bringing the total number of states to 31. Now, 7 out of 10 Canadian provinces have now done so as well, and joining European capital cities such as Paris, London, Berlin, and others, North American cities like Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Vancouver, El Paso, and many others have followed. Last year, in fact, as local communities felt the heavy weight of a record-breaking number of anti-Semitic attacks and incidents, the largest category for new adoptions were local governments, 58 in total, cities, towns, counties, state and provincial governments, more than half of which took place in the United States. On the national level, 40 countries representing hundreds of millions of people, and including most Western democracies, have now endorsed the definition, with the Republic of Croatia as the newest nation to do so this spring. The largest and possibly most important category of adoptions has been by the more than 475 non-federal government entities who recognized how anti-Semitism threatens the cohesion of local communities. Following local governments, more than 345 educational institutions and student governments from the Balkans to California have embraced the definition as a means to support Jewish students who face a barrage of institutional and peer-induced anti-Semitic pressures. And now, more than 300 NGOs and public and private institutions, from sports clubs to faith groups and political parties of every ideological stripe, have united in supporting Jewish life by endorsing the IHRA definition and its 11 explanatory examples as a unifying measure to combat the forms of anti-Semitism most experienced by Jewish people today. While no policy framework will ever be without critics, the data shows that the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism is the most powerful tool to recognize and ultimately beat back the lived experiences of anti-Jewish discrimination in the 21st century. There is great power in unity, from Muslim-majority nations to Christian ones, left-wing and right-wing parties, governments small and large, and other groups across society, unifying around this definition, unifying in support of Jewish life everywhere. I am hopeful that using this tool, together we can begin to imagine a future free from the destructive forces of hate. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur, for your insightful words. Well, one of the most effective steps governments at the national, regional, state, and local levels can take to fight anti-Semitism is to adopt and implement the IHRA definition and its 11 examples of discriminatory behaviors against Jews. I'm now honored to introduce our first guest speaker, the Honorable Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee. Tennessee is among the 31 U.S. states to have adopted or endorsed the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism via legislation, resolutions, executive orders, or executive proclamations. Last May, Governor Lee signed a bill prohibiting the teaching of anti-Semitic concepts in Tennessee schools, codifying the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism into state law. Governor Lee, welcome.
Hey everybody, Governor Bill Lee here. Here in Tennessee, we believe that each person should be treated with dignity and respect, and we have worked to support communities of faith by remaining vigilant against anti-Semitism and acts of hate. Though the Jewish people have faced immeasurable persecution and adversity throughout history, they remain strong and faithful, and Tennessee is committed to supporting the Jewish community, and we commend your efforts to stand against anti-Semitism.
Thank you so much, Governor Lee, for joining us today. Tennessee really is setting an example for other states to emulate with the important steps it's taken to combat anti-Semitism in recent years. Next, we'll go to New Jersey, where we welcome Congressman Josh Gottheimer, who represents the Garden State's 5th District in the U.S. House of Representatives and is a leading voice among American legislators against Jew hatred and a vocal supporter of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. Congressman Gottheimer, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Gottheimer. Sasha, thank you so much for your leadership and all you do, and for all of you for inviting me here today. It's great to be back with you, and it's a real privilege to have been part of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement Summit. It is an amazing gathering, and I'm grateful for all you're doing and all you have done over the years. Let me begin by saying that what CAM is doing on this front in a nonpartisan way is critical to combating the roots of anti-Semitism wherever we see it rear its ugly head. As Tom Lantos, the only Holocaust survivor to have served in the United States Congress, warned us, the veneer of civilization is paper thin. We are its guardians, and we can never rest. That's why it's so important the international community, and especially all departments and agencies of the American government, adopt and use in practice the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism. In recent years here in the United States, some school districts have considered implementing ethnic studies curricula that could include deeply troubling anti-Semitic content. Specifically, certain model curricula include components that antagonize all forms of Zionism and define anti-Semitism as discrimination against, violence toward, or stereotypes of Jews for being Jewish, while not addressing the use of anti-Semitic tropes, including those masquerading as anti-Israel sentiments. These components directly contradict IHRA's working definition of anti-Semitism. That definition includes, quote, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor. Our educational programs should be free of bias against any group. We need a united effort to combat rising anti-Semitism and bigotry, including ensuring that we do not fund anti-Semitic curricula in our schools. Adopting IHRA's working definition of anti-Semitism is crucial to identifying and combating anti-Semitism, again, wherever we see it. I've called on the United States Department of Education to ensure that elementary and secondary schools do not engage in teaching of any anti-Semitic or bigoted curricula and encourage school districts to value a curricula that is inclusive and free from bias. Unfortunately, I've had people in my office, sitting in my office, showing me books with anti-Semitism in the books that are being pushed into classrooms as other books that purposely stand up to anti-Semitism or talk about the Shoah removed from the classroom, including in the state of New Jersey, where I'm from. I've also urged DOE to prioritize the rulemaking process for Title VI to ensure students who are perceived to be Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, Buddhist, or other religious groups are protected under federal law, as they should be here in the greatest country in the world. In Congress, I've been a strong proponent of taking all measures necessary to protect students against hate, discrimination, and bigotry, especially Jewish students who face a barrage of anti-Semitism on their college campuses, now more than ever. in recent years. Sadly, we have learned from our history that when anti-Semitic rhetoric goes unaddressed, it can fuel increased hatred, violence, and lead to unspeakable acts against Jewish people and others. It unleashes hatred, and we must stomp that out wherever we see it. We also know the knowledge about the Holocaust is beginning to fade, unfortunately. It's more important than ever now for educators to memorialize the Holocaust and discuss and learn from its history. That's why I fought for legislation like the bipartisan Never Again Education Act and helped get it signed into law, and I'm very proud of that, to create a new grant program for the United States Holocaust Museum to ensure schools and teachers have the resources and tools they need to teach about the Holocaust. It's why I've brought together Democrats and Republicans and introduced my new bipartisan legislation, the Holocaust Education Anti-Semitism Lessons Act, or the HEAL Act, with nearly 100 co-sponsors. My bipartisan legislation will ask the U.S. Memorial Holocaust Museum to conduct a study on Holocaust education and efforts in public schools nationwide to understand what our schools are doing, what they are teaching. We need to understand if our children are actually being taught about the Holocaust and understand what they're being taught. Is it just mentioned in passing, or is it actually part of the curricula in a meaningful way? The outcome of this study will show us which states and school districts require or do not require Holocaust education in their curricula, whether or not Holocaust education is merely optional. It will identify the standards and requirements schools mandate on this education, and it will tell us types and quality of instructional materials used to teach, and identify the approaches used by schools to access what students learn, and then to assess what students learn, and then report all of this back to Congress so that we understand what's going on in our country and what we're teaching our children to, again, prevent it from ever happening again. I'm dedicated to doing my part to ensure that never again is not just a phrase, but a reality. To close, I want to thank Cam again for everything that you do to stand up to anti-Semitism and for the fight you put on every single day against hatred in our country. May God bless all of you. May God and continue to bless the greatest country in the world. And I know that if we work together as Democrats and Republicans to stand up to hate and to anti-Semitism in all forms, our best days will always be ahead of us. God bless.
Thank you, Congressman Gottheimer, for your proven commitment to fighting anti-Semitism both in the U.S. and abroad. I'd now like to introduce Mr. Antonio Lopez Istúriz White, a member of the European Parliament from Spain and chair of the European Parliament Delegation for Relations with Israel.
The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism is a crucial tool in the fight against the rising tide of anti-Semitism. Its adoption is the clearest step we can take towards recognizing and addressing the persistent and pervasive problem of anti-Semitism. The IHRA defines anti-Semitism as a certain perception of Jews which might be expressed as hatred towards Jews. This includes several examples, including stereotyping, Holocaust denial, and holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel. By adopting this definition, individuals and organizations can better understand what constitutes anti-Semitism and take appropriate measures to combat it. One of the key benefits of adopting this definition is that it provides a common language and framework for identifying and combating anti-Semitism. It is particularly important given the increasing complexity and diversity of anti-Semitic attitudes and behaviors. Moreover, adopting the definition can also help to raise awareness about the persistence and prevalence of this type of hate speech. By naming and defining anti-Semitism, individuals and organizations can help to expose and challenge its various forms, including those that might be more subtle or hidden. Finally, adopting the definition is an important symbolic gesture. It sends a message that anti-Semitism will not be tolerated, and that individuals and organizations are committed to taking action to combat it. I am glad that the European Union not only recommends this definition for education and training purposes for teachers, NGOs, state authorities, and the media, but has also published a handbook for its practical use. Right now, almost all EU member states have adopted or endorsed this definition, a testament to its usefulness and importance. All of us together must continue our work to make sure that hatred against Jewish communities is once and for all eliminated from our societies.
Thank you so much, European Parliament member Lopez Istúriz White, for continually being a leading voice on combating anti-Semitism in the European Parliament. Our next speaker is Arizona State Representative Alma Hernandez, a prominent advocate for the Jewish people and the State of Israel, both in her activities at the state capitol in Phoenix and online. Last year, a Holocaust education bill introduced by Representative Hernandez, which included the adoption of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, was passed into law. Representative Hernandez, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm State Representative Alma Hernandez here from Arizona, and I'm really excited to join you all here at Combating Anti-Semitism Movement. And also, I want to thank Sasha for inviting me to give these remarks. It is extremely important for us to do everything that we can in our communities and around the world to ensure that we are fighting against anti-Semitism. This organization has done so much around that, whether it's been educating the students, children, adults, and people in politics about what it means when we are dealing with anti-Semitism in our community and what it means to have the IHRA definition adopted. So this is an extremely important event. I am so thrilled to be able to be a partner with all of you working on combating anti-Semitism, not only in Arizona, but all over the country and the world. It is important that we all stick together and do everything that we can to support the efforts of not only this organization, but all of the other organizations that are working so hard together to ensure a safer and a better place for us all when it comes to the Jewish community here, not only in Arizona, but around the world. I want to again thank you all for participating in this, how the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism has transformed the fight against contemporary Jew hatred. I think it's one of those issues that we should all be talking about and that we should all care about. It's important that we continue this fight together and that we all continue to do the work so that many people in our communities do not have to worry about being Jewish openly or worry about being hated because of who they are. So thank you again to all of you over at CAM for all of the work that you're doing to ensure that we are fighting and combating anti-Semitism, not only in Arizona, but all over the world. Great seeing you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Hernandez, for your remarks and for all that you do to raise awareness of the dangers of rising anti-Semitism. Mayors and municipal governments have a unique role to play in confronting anti-Semitism where it is most directly felt, on the streets of the communities where Jews live their day-to-day lives. Major capitals around the world, including London, Paris, Berlin, Vienna, and Washington, D.C., among others, have adopted the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism in recent years to help fight religious bigotry and secure and nurture Jewish life. Joining us now is the Honorable Arian Veliai, Mayor of Tirana, the capital of Albania. Long known as a bastion of religious tolerance and coexistence, Albania became the first Muslim-majority country to adopt the IHRA definition in 2020. Mayor Veliai, welcome to our program.
Hello, everyone, and greetings from Tirana, Albania, the European City of Sports for 2023. It's such an honor to be with you today at this very important online event for the Combat Anti-Semitism movement. I want to start by congratulating the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance for its efforts in fighting contemporary Jew hatred. Albania is proud to be an observer in this organization. We believe that by achieving a common understanding of anti-Semitism, we can fight it even more effectively. Albania has set an example for other countries to follow as the first Muslim-majority state to adopt the IHRA anti-Semitism definition. This is an important step in our ongoing fight against anti-Semitism. During World War II, Albania became a landscape of hope and refuge for many Jews. The Jewish population in Tirana grew tenfold during the war, thanks to Albanians who sheltered them in their homes and hid them in the mountain communities to keep them safe from enemy forces. We recently unveiled Tirana's first Holocaust memorial, which honors and remembers the 6 million Jews of Europe who were murdered during the Holocaust and recognizes the acts of bravery and humanity by Albanian citizens who protected the Jewish people. Last week in Tirana, we organized the Tirana Tel Aviv Tech Week, a dynamic event centered on technology, cybersecurity, and innovation. With 88 Israeli companies and investors in attendance, this event was a great opportunity to pave the way for stronger Albania-Israeli cooperation and an opportunity to make our aspirations a reality by transforming Tirana into the Tel Aviv of the Balkans. Let's continue to work together to fight anti-Semitism and to build a fair and secure world for everyone. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hosting you in Tirana one day.
Thank you, Mayor Valiai, for your participation in this forum today. Next, let's go back to the United States, where we will hear from Jared Neuenhaus, the Deputy Mayor of the city of Bellevue, Washington. The Bellevue City Council was among the 58 non-federal government entities, more than half of which were in the United States, to adopt the IHRA definition last year. Deputy Mayor Neuenhaus, welcome.
Hello, my name is Jared Neuenhaus, Deputy Mayor of the City of Bellevue in Washington State, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of your event today. The City of Bellevue is a vibrant, innovative, and caring community of engaged citizens. This is a key reason why our council felt it was essential to join with members of our significant and active local Jewish community to denounce anti-Semitism publicly. In October, the Bellevue City Council adopted the internationally recognized definition of anti-Semitism from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance as a way to show solidarity against discrimination in all its forms in Bellevue, particularly in response to increases in reports of anti-Semitism within the past several years. We also want to make sure the community knows they should report such incidents of hate and discrimination to local police. Along with Bellevue, several other regional cities, counties, and agencies have since made similar proclamations to illustrate the importance of supporting and protecting the safety and sense of belonging of our Jewish community members. Bellevue welcomes the world, and we believe our diversity is our strength. We embrace our many diverse cultures and believe all people have a right to live free of hostility, prejudice, or discrimination against them. Your dedication and commitment to these same causes are an inspiration. So thank you all for what you're doing to ensure the safety, security, and inclusion of all people. Enjoy the remainder of your virtual gathering.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Neuenhaus, for your remarks. We hope other cities in the state of Washington and across the United States will follow Bellevue's lead in adopting the IHRA definition, a critical step to the fight against anti-Semitism at the municipal level. Next, let's cross the Pacific Ocean to the city of Glen Eira in Australia. Last April, the Glen Eira City Council became the first council in the state of Victoria to adopt the IHRA definition and only the second in all of Australia. Joining us now is Glen Eira City Council member Margaret Esikoff, who was the driving force behind the measure. Councillor Esikoff, welcome.
Hello, my name's Margaret Esikoff and I'm a councillor at Glen Eira City Council in Victoria, Australia. And I thank you for the opportunity to appear at this special event and I heartily endorse the great work that you do. As I was the councillor who brought the idea of adopting the IHRA definition to Glen Eira City Council, I was invited by the Mayor, Councillor Jim McGee, to speak to you in his stead and with his full support. At Glen Eira City Council, we are always keen to take a stand against racism in general and anti-Semitism in particular, being the council with the largest Jewish population of any council in Australia. We feel that practical steps are obviously very important, but so is making a statement of principle. We understood that the IHRA definition is the most authoritative definition of anti-Semitism, and of course, if you want to combat a problem, you need to define it and understand it. It was therefore decided that we should adopt the IHRA definition both as a practical tool for fighting anti-Semitism and to make a statement that we endorse the definition and its sentiments and oppose anti-Semitism as set out in the definition. For these reasons, we also wrote to every other council in Victoria and also to the Municipal Association of Victoria, the roof body of all councils, urging them to adopt the definition as well as issuing a media release calling on all Australian political parties, universities, councils and other public bodies and organisations to also adopt the definition. Fortunately, we've not needed to utilise this definition since adopting it in April 2022, as there have not been reports that Council has needed to deal with of behaviour that could be considered anti-Semitism. However, our officers now know that if such an unfortunate event does arise, they will have the tools to determine whether action is needed. Glenara City Council has a zero tolerance policy towards racism in council facilities or from council staff, so adoption of the definition will assist in the implementation of this policy if necessary. Furthermore, the Jewish community in particular and the wider community are aware that we have taken this step and the message that it sends. The Jewish community on the whole was very appreciative of the support that passing this motion demonstrates, and the wider community has a much greater understanding of the nature of anti-Semitism and of Council's stance. Council's Multicultural Advisory Committee is in the process of developing a list of priority actions to inform the future work of Council, and that will include promoting the reporting racism tool and the adoption of the IHRA definition. We are pleased that we've not yet needed to put the IHRA definition to practical use, but we are grateful that it is now available if required and have been able to make the significant statement that is entailed in adopting it. Again, I thank you for this opportunity and thank you for your good work in this important area.
Thank you, Councillor Esikoff, for being with us today and your leadership on this very important issue. Well, in total, 40 countries, including most Western democracies, have adopted the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, following nations such as the United States, Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom, and France. The newest additions to this group in 2022 were the Philippines, Colombia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Croatia was the first country to do so in 2023. We are now honored to be joined by the Honourable Irwin Cotler, Canada's Special Envoy on Preserving Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Anti-Semitism. Professor Cotler is a longtime international human rights lawyer and a former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. He's also the founder and chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights and a member of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement Advisory Board. Professor Cotler, welcome to our program today.
Okay. May I begin by commending CAM for organizing yet another timely and significant forum. For we meet on the occasion not only of a resurgent global anti-Semitism, of a resurgence of the oldest, longest, most enduring, lethal, and toxic of hatreds, but on the occasion of the mainstreaming, the normalizing, the legitimation of anti-Semitism in the political culture, the popular culture, entertainment, sports, campus cultures, the absence of outrage and accompanied often by indifference and inaction. If we want to effectively combat this scourge of anti-Semitism and its many manifestations, then we have to be able to recognize it, identify it, and effectively define it. The IHRA working definition on anti-Semitism, which I helped draft and advance as a member of Parliament and Minister of Justice over 20 years ago, is the most authoritative, comprehensive, and international definition that we have, one which reflects and represents as well the diverse experiences of its targets. And what is not so well known, this definition was democratically adopted over a 15-year period by intergovernmental bodies, governments, parliaments, scholars, civil society leaders, and the like, and includes within it the manifestations of both the old and new anti-Semitism, anchored in a human rights and equality rights approach. In other words, traditional anti-Semitism is a discrimination against, denial of, assault upon the rights of Jews to live as equal members in whatever society they inhabit. The new anti-Semitism is a discrimination against denial of assault upon the rights of Israel and the Jewish people to live as an equal member of the family of nations. What is common to both forms of anti-Semitism, old and new, is discrimination. All that has happened is moved from discrimination against Jews as individuals to discrimination against Jews as a people, and reverberating back to discrimination against Jews as individuals. The IHRA non-binding working definition on anti-Semitism is a looking glass into these manifestations of anti-Semitism, traditional and new, and in particular, addressing it through this equality rights lens. And since anti-Semitism, as we know, is toxic to democracies, an assault on our common humanity, as we've learned only too dangerously and too well, that while it begins with Jews, it doesn't end with Jews. Combating anti-Semitism and using the IHRA working definition as an educational resource, as an indispensable asset, will help us protect our democracy, will help us protect our common humanity, will allow us to engage in the promotion and protection of human rights and human dignity as we combat this age-old hatred in its many manifestations today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kotler, for your many invaluable contributions to the collective effort against anti-Semitism over the course of your storied career. Next, we will go to the United Kingdom, where we are being joined by the Right Honourable Lord John Mann, who serves as His Majesty's Government Independent Advisor on Antisemitism. Lord Mann is also a member of the Combat Antisemitism Movement Advisory Board, and he is a leading voice promoting the IHRA working definition of antisemitism in the United Kingdom, particularly among educational institutions. Lord Mann, welcome.
You can't deal with the discrimination or hatred if you can't define what it is. And that's the whole point of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. It creates the reference point which people can use to guide them in understanding how anti-Semitism manifests, how it impacts on individuals. The definition is about people. It's not about institutions, it's not about countries, it's about people. It's about Jewish people. And how anti-Jewish racism impacts on Jewish people. And where, in the many places, the IHRA definition has been used, it gives an empowerment to the individual. For example, to the young Jewish student in a university. For example, to the Jewish teenager on the streets. For example, to the Jewish sports player or spectator. In being able to say, this isn't acceptable, and here's why it's not acceptable. That could be major issues. It could be a simple discomfort, but an ongoing discomfort. If we live in a society where everyone's able to be themselves, then sometimes the worst discriminations are the discrimination of silence, of being shunned, of being isolated because of being yourself. The IHRA definition deals with that directly. It is deliberately and calculatedly not a legal definition. It's not a definition for the police and the courts. It's a definition below the legal threshold. That's not a weakness. That's its strength. It's the whole point of the IHRA definition. Most ways in which racism impacts on Jewish people today are not subtle, but disguised, camouflaged. And the IHRA definition is the only tool that allows institutions to reference, to think through, to preempt and to deal with modern anti-Semitism. It is essential for the health and well-being of society, of its Jewish community. It's critical for young Jewish people in particular.
Thank you, Lord Mann, for your remarks and everything you do to push back against anti-Semitism in the UK. Now we'll go to Romania for remarks by Irina Dumitrita-Solomon, the coordinator of the government's Interministerial Committee for monitoring the implementation of the National Strategy for Preventing and Combating Anti-Semitism. Romania adopted the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism back in 2017 and has implemented the definition as a training tool for its police force. Coordinator Solomon, welcome to our program today.
First of all, I would like to congratulate you for this initiative, which brings a real contribution to the international efforts of combating anti-Semitism and protecting our democratic values. It is our duty to fight anti-Semitism, racism, radicalization, and hate speech, and Romania has been very committed in this respect. The IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism was adopted in 2016 during the Romanian presidency of IHRA, and it was one of the chairmanship's lead projects. Romania has endorsed nationally the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism in 2017, and it has been incorporated into Romanian law in 2018. The new law introduced sanctions for promoting anti-Semitic ideas, for using anti-Semitic materials in public, as well as for making, selling, disseminating, or holding anti-Semitic materials. The definition is currently being used both in courts, but also as a working definition in training and educational programs. Judicial authorities currently employ the IHRA working definition in identifying and dealing with hate crime related to anti-Semitism. Moreover, starting with 2017, the National Institute for Romanian Holocaust Studies, ELEVISL, has organized training programs for gendarmerie, law enforcement officers, judges, and prosecutors. Since 2017, more than 150 police officers and approximately 90 officers from the intelligence service have attended training sessions of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. Another important result was the adoption of a code of conduct on combating anti-Semitism in universities, of which the IHRA definition is an integral part. So far, 30 state universities have adopted the code. On the other hand, we have continued to encourage states and organizations such as the European Union, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the Council of Europe to endorse IHRA non-legally binding working definition of anti-Semitism. 2 years ago, the Romanian government adopted its first national strategy for preventing and combating anti-Semitism, xenophobia, radicalization, and hate speech. This is an essential instrument, especially in the current context, in which we can notice an intensification of conspiracy theories as well as the proliferation of anti-Semitic, racist, or xenophobic messages, especially online. The strategy has an action plan which includes 36 concrete programs structured on the 3 major objectives of the strategy: security of vulnerable communities, promoting tolerance, civic education, and the resilience of the Romanian society, and the last one, enhancing international efforts to combat anti-Semitism, xenophobia, radicalization, and hate speech. An interministerial committee under my coordination is responsible for monitoring the implementation of the strategy and focused on achieving concrete results. Since adoption of the strategy, we could highlight some progress. All the main actions foreseen in the action plan have started and a significant number were already completed. The institutional capacities developed to prevent and combat anti-Semitism, xenophobia, radicalization, and hate speech have demonstrated their viability. Against this background, the activity of internal and interinstitutional working group has developed in close dialogue with civil society organizations. Progress has also been made in developing more effective methodologies for identifying, reporting, and assessing incidents. The strategy pays special attention to the need of developing a toolbox that will allow us to have a better understanding and diagnostic of anti-Semitism in Romania. For example, the Romanian Ministry of Internal Affairs has created 2 working groups dedicated to this subject. The first one is tasked with the periodical assessment of the security risks, and the second one has developed a new methodology of reporting cases of hate crime. As an element of novelty and as a tribute to our legacy, specialists in the research of the Holocaust and 2 Holocaust survivors attended the meetings. I would also like to mention 2 other key points of our work. Romania has started setting up a National Museum of Jewish History and the Holocaust, and starting with the next school year, the history of the Jews and the Holocaust in Romania will be studied as a compulsory subject in Romanian high schools. I will conclude by recalling that we will continue to encourage states and organizations to endorse IHRA's non-legally binding working definition of anti-Semitism, and we will continue our unwavering support for the definition. Romania will be active both internationally and nationally in the field of combating anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial or distortion, preserving the memory of the Holocaust victims, and supporting Holocaust education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Coordinator Solomon, for providing us with a deeper understanding of Romania's approach to combating anti-Semitism. We appreciate the important work you and your government are doing. Now, in addition to national governments, international intergovernmental organizations have also looked to the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism to aid them in tackling Jew hatred. We now welcome European Parliament Vice President Nicola Beer, who oversees the Special Envoy on Combating Religious Discrimination, including anti-Semitism. She also chairs the European Parliament's Working Group on Anti-Semitism. Vice President Beer, it's an honor to have you with us today.
Dear honorable guests, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to speak to you today. As a Vice President of the European Parliament and Special Envoy on Combating Religious Discrimination, it is among my highest priorities to fight any form of anti-Semitism, to foster Jewish life around Europe, and to protect the deep-rooted Jewish culture, values and traditions on European soil. However, the past couple of years have seen a rise in anti-Semitic narratives and virulent attacks, as well as disinformation campaigns. The COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the ongoing Russian invasion of the sovereign neighbor Ukraine, accelerated the spread and manifestation of anti-Semitism around the world. Online as well as offline, we observe a steady rise of religious-based hate, which is often paired with disturbing and worrying conspiracy theories against Jews. Each single anti-Semitic behavior puts European values, such as the respect for democracy, the rule of law, or human rights, in danger. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance and its working definition of anti-Semitism are a vital instrument to protect the rights of Jews and actively fight hatred in the world. Anti-Semitism in every single form must be contained. The Adoptions and Endorsements Report 2022 is a beacon of hope for the Jewish community, as well as for everyone who fights anti-Semitism. It is insightful to see that so many countries, most recently Finland, Colombia, the Philippines, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, leading organizations and companies such as Lufthansa, have adopted the working definition of anti-Semitism around the globe. Hopefully, it is just the beginning. At the same time, the report is a steady reminder of what we still have left ahead of us for the future. We need to make sure that the working definition becomes the commonly used benchmark when we talk about anti-Semitic behavior. In order to achieve that, more governments and companies need to apply the definition, which illustrates the different modern forms of anti-Semitic behaviors, and educate their employees in recognizing and thus combating anti-Semitism. Only if we expand the circle of supporters can we halt the alarming recent developments against Jews. However, companies and states are not enough. Peoples-to-peoples contacts are the key to strengthening understanding and to jointly fighting anti-Semitism. Thus, we must continue to build bridges across all religions and foster intercultural exchange. The Abraham Accords are, for example, a significant step in order to develop mutual trust and interest in each other's religion and culture. We can already see its impact. This year, Egypt marked the Holocaust Remembrance Day for the second year in a row. Morocco reconstructs Jewish heritage that shows the historical and actual interconnectivity of the people and societies in the region. I want to encourage you to continue the fight against anti-Semitic behavior in order to build a world without anti-Semitism, discrimination, racism, and instead with dignity and respect for all religious beliefs, which are all a part of our different societies. Finally, I would like to thank all of you for coming together, and I wish you an insightful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Beer, for your participation today and all of your hard work combating anti-Semitism in the European Union. Now, Mr. Ahmed Shahid is a professor of international human rights law at the University of Essex and a former United Nations Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. In 2019, then Special Rapporteur Shahid issued a first-of-its-kind UN report on anti-Semitism, which highlighted the importance of the IHRA definition. A current member of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement Advisory Board, Professor Shahid joins us now. Welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. Good afternoon and good evening. I am grateful to Combat Anti-Semitism Movement for inviting me to speak about the importance of the IHRA working definition to the work of countering the global spread of anti-Semitism. By the end of last year, 39 states have adopted the working definition. The diffusion of the working definition has extended to local governments, academia, and civil society. This dissemination of the working definition is in part the result of its focus on contemporary forms of anti-Semitism, which includes demonization of Israel, and in part because of the continued alarming trends in anti-Semitic discourses and attacks on Jews. In my report to the UN in 2019, I examined in some detail the text of the working definition, along with the non-exhaustive list of examples of what could potentially be anti-Semitic speech. I concluded that the working definition on anti-Semitism can be a useful tool for monitoring and reporting on anti-Semitism when used in accordance with international guarantees of freedom of expression. I stress that the IHRA itself declares that the working definition on anti-Semitism is a non-legal tool to be used for educational purposes, and further that the listed examples need to be subjected to a contextual assessment to determine if and when the impugned speech can be deemed to be anti-Semitic. The following year, the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, IHRA, also examined the IHRA working definition and welcomed it as a non-legal tool that can aid and promote a better understanding of anti-Semitism. While critics of the working definition alleged that its use would suppress criticism of Israel government policies, IHRA noted that the working definition, and I quote, is based on a concept that also includes various contemporary forms of anti-Semitism without trying to delegitimize criticism of Israel to the extent that latter is held to the same standards as any other state, end of quotation. The diffusion of the IHRA working definition has also resulted in counter-mobilization against the working definition. The core argument used is that the working definition is being abused or misused to suppress legitimate criticism of Israel. Granted that some proponents of this view do refer to examples where the IHRA working definition appears to be incorrectly applied, but that is the point precisely. What the critics are pointing to are instances of where the working definition was being used for purposes other than it was designed for use by IHRA. And therefore, my view is that what is needed is to address that phenomenon, not discard the working definition itself. What is therefore required is to build more capacity of government actors and others who use the working definition to be able to use it as it was intended to be used and as explicitly asserted by IHRA as a non-legal tool and to make context-based assessments in accordance with the law. At the end of my UN mandate last year, I presented an action plan to all stakeholders, including the UN, to increase their efforts to combat anti-Semitism, including the use of the IHRA working definition. While the UN has not formally adopted the working definition, Secretary General has committed to combating anti-Semitism, and it would be strange for an organization that is committed to combating anti-Semitism to disregard the most widely used working definition. It is my hope that rather than spend time in developing a new UN definition of anti-Semitism and imposing one on Jews, that the UN would focus on addressing and responding to all forms of anti-Semitism wherever they are manifested, and where they amount to incitement to discrimination, hostility, and violence against Jews in accordance with human rights obligations, and as I had mentioned in my UN report. After all, the UN does not have a universally agreed definition on hate speech itself, nor many other critical concepts on which it has rightly devoted much attention, such as minorities. What matters is that the UN in its entirety can recognize and respond to anti-Semitism. This is where the non-legal educational tool given by IHRA working definition can be helpful, and when used as intended by IHRA for making context-based assessments in accordance with the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shahid, for speaking with us today and the groundbreaking work you did in your UN role. Next, I am pleased to welcome to the program Kenneth Marcus, founder and chairman of the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law. The Brandeis Center is actively involved in countering anti-Semitism on college and university campuses, including by filing Title VI complaints with the U.S. Department of Education on behalf of Jewish students facing discrimination and harassment. Mr. Marcus, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Kenneth Marcus, chairman of the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law, and also former Assistant Secretary of Education for Civil Rights. I'd like to say a few words about the use of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, including its guiding examples relative to Israel, by colleges and universities. I'm sometimes asked whether a particular college or university should adopt the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. And I think it's a great question because the fact is that the IHRA working definition is, among other things, an excellent educational tool that institutions like colleges, universities, and public schools can use in order to inform their constituents, their students, their faculty, their staff, about what is anti-Semitic and what isn't, in order that one might avoid inadvertently crossing a line into what is in fact a form of hate or bias. But it seems to me that the question whether a university or college should adopt the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism often ignores a more fundamental point, which is that in virtually all cases, whether they know it or not, they already have, which is to say, they may or may not have adopted the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism with all of the symbolism and hoopla that sometimes attends a formal announcement by a high-placed leader like a university president. But the fact is that in a very real sense, virtually every American college and university is bound by certain aspects of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, whether they know it or not, whether they speak about it or not, whether they have an announcement or not, whether they have a formal adoption or not. Universities and colleges in the United States nearly all receive some form of financial assistance from the U.S. Department of Education, and when they do so, they sign formal assurances or certifications indicating that they will comply with applicable federal laws, statutes, regulations, executive orders, and that unquestionably includes not only Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which in very broad terms prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin, including discrimination against Jewish Americans, but also Executive Order 13899, which since 2019 has incorporated the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism and its examples in the sense that it directs U.S. federal officials, such as the head of the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, to consider the IHRA definition when evaluating claims that a recipient institution is violating the rights of Jewish students to determine whether the intent of the conduct is anti-Semitic. So in a real sense, first, federal officials are already evaluating the response of universities to anti-Semitism under the IHRA working definition. That's not just a practice, it's actually a formal policy. IHRA does not restrict speech critical of Israel. Second, IHRA recognizes that much criticism of Israel has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And third, IHRA itself is simply a definition. That is to say, it tells us what we mean by words. It is actionable. It is binding only to the extent that it is made binding by applicable governmental entities. So we now have a situation in which IHRA is indispensable to the regulatory fabric by which universities are governed. And in fact, there are some people who agree very strongly that IHRA is not only the one internationally agreed upon definition of anti-Semitism, but that it is the best. but there are others who disagree. And you know what? The fact is that we have never had in the United States an important civil rights measure that wasn't controversial in some sense. From the 14th Amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, to all of the statutes that protect the rights of Americans, every single one of them has faced some degree of resistance. The IHRA working definition is unique in the extent of the support it has received, not only among a very large number of major Jewish organizations, many of which do not agree with one another on very much, but also by half of our states, by over 30 nations around the world, and by over 1,000 other entities. I do think that college and university officials, whether they adopt IHRA or not, should be transparent about the extent to which IHRA, under the executive order, is a part of their regulatory fabric. Colleges and universities routinely educate and inform their students and faculty members about federal law relating to analogous civil rights areas like sexual harassment or reasonable accommodation for disabilities. It is entirely appropriate for colleges and universities to provide guidance, education, training, and orientation to their constituent members about how IHRA applies. I think it's important for colleges and universities to make clear that IHRA is not a tool for limiting speech, but that it is nevertheless an important tool, an educational tool, and also a tool for understanding that there are times in which, whether we know it or not, our conduct crosses a line. And I think it is entirely appropriate for leaders to make sure that those lines are drawn very clearly, and to the extent that those lines are part of our federal and state law, that they're widely known. IHRA is today not only the one internationally agreed upon definition of anti-Semitism, but it has rapidly become the most influential aspect of our federal regulation when it comes to anti-Semitism. This is an important development, and I think it is an entirely salutary one that it is increasingly adopted, as well as understood, embraced, and educated around by a large number of institutions. It is very good to be with you today, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus, for your insights and all the meaningful work the Brandeis Center does for Jewish students. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Alvin Rosenfeld, the Irving M. Glazer Chair in Jewish Studies at Indiana University, Bloomington, and Director of the school's Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism. Dr. Rosenfeld held a 5-year presidential appointment on the United States Holocaust Memorial Council and also served on the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's Executive Committee. He has also been a leading advocate for the IHRA definition, most recently calling on the Biden administration to use the definition in its new national strategy for combating anti-Semitism in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal.
Welcome to everyone. I'm glad to speak with you. Hostility to Jews and Judaism, as we know, dates back over many centuries, has a variety of causes, and manifests itself in various ways. Here is how the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks summed up this troubled history. I quote Rabbi Sacks, "Anti-Semitism," he writes, "means denying the right of Jews to exist collectively as Jews with the same rights as everyone else. It takes different forms in different ages. In the Middle Ages, Jews were hated because of their religion. In the 19th and early 20th century, they were hated because of their race. Today," he concludes, "they are hated because of their nation state, the state of Israel." And it goes without saying that any viable working definition of anti-Semitism today has to take into consideration the links between this hatred of the Jewish state and Jew hatred more generally conceived. Those who see Israel in these hostile terms regularly denounce the country as an evil entity or criminal state and accuse it of the worst of sins: racism, apartheid, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and even genocide. Some go so far as to liken Israel to apartheid South Africa and Nazi Germany. The effect of such denunciations is to demonize and delegitimize the Jewish state and to call into question its very right to exist, a right denied to no other state on the globe. Understood in these terms, Rabbi Sachs is surely correct to conclude that anti-Zionism is the anti-Semitism of our time, and since the turn of the millennium, in fact, anti-Zionist anti-Semitism has emerged as one of the dominant manifestations of Jew hatred in the 21st century. Proponents of anti-Zionism disagree, reject any ties to anti-Semitism, and contend that Israel should not be immune to criticism. On this latter point, of course, they are right. No state should be immune to criticism, including Israel. Within Israel itself, a democratic country with a free press, criticism of all kinds is a daily, robust affair. But there are crucial differences between what we typically think of as legitimate criticism and mean-spirited, impassioned vilification. It was no doubt in recognition of these issues that in 2016, the 31 member states of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA, adopted its working definition of anti-Semitism. The United States State Department has also adopted this definition, as have many other governments, institutions, agencies, and other offices. While the IHRA definition explicitly states that criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic, it includes several examples of alleged criticism of Israel and the Jews that are deemed to be anti-Semitic. Those who actively oppose Israel's existence and labor to see the country eradicated object to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism on the grounds that it supposedly silences criticism of Israel and thereby limits free speech. As already noted, though, this definition makes clear that criticism of Israel like that leveled against any other country cannot and should not be regarded as anti-Semitism. Comparing Israel to Nazi Germany, for instance, is not to criticize the country, but to defame it and libel it, and calling for the country's end is nothing short of eliminationist in its goal. For these and a number of other reasons, the working definition of anti-Semitism put out by IHRA, I personally find useful and encourage others to use it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenfeld, for sharing your expertise with us today on anti-Semitism and the IHRA definition. And with that, we have come to the end of our program. We hope you come away from today's event better informed about the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism and its critical role in efforts across society and around the globe to counter rising bigotry, discrimination, and prejudice. If you missed any part of the broadcast or would like to revisit it in the future, you'll receive an email with a full recording, which will also be available online at the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement's social media channels. CAM works each and every day to unite people from a diverse array of religious, political, and cultural backgrounds with the common mission of fighting the world's oldest hatred. And we invite you to join us as we seek to promote interfaith tolerance and harmony and build a better future for Jews and all of humanity. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye for now.